You ever feel like the world is targeting one person specifically? Like it wakes up and chooses someone to test today? That was Elara, right in the middle of a snowstorm that didn't feel random at all. This was no gentle snowfall. This storm had teeth. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill your skin, it goes straight for your memories, your hope, your heartbeat. The snow flew sideways, sharp like glass. The wind howled low, almost animal-like, the kind of sound that makes you look over your shoulder even if you know nothing's there. And the trees, trust me, the trees sounded worse. Big old pine trees bending and creaking under the frost, groaning like tired giants holding on to a secret. It felt like the forest itself was grieving. Elara barely noticed any of that, though. Because she was too busy trying to stay alive. She was stumbling through thigh-deep snow, every step a fight. The cold stitched itself into the fabric of her lungs. Every breath she took came out shaky, sharp, burning. In her hand, dragging behind her, was a hunting knife soaked in blood, not because she'd attacked someone, but because the last time she'd held that knife, she was defending herself. Defending a pup. Defending something innocent in a world that had lost its softness. Her legs trembled violently beneath her. Not the dramatic kind of trembling you see in movies. This was the real kind, the survival kind. Her knees kept betraying her. She'd rise, stagger, fall again, like the storm was making sure she stayed humble. The worst part? The wounds weren't just physical. Yeah, she'd been stabbed. Yeah, she was bleeding under layers of torn cloth. But the real injury was what happened before the storm. It was the voices. The judgment. The sentence they spoke over her name like she wasn't standing right there in the circle, shaking, asking for someone to listen. Her own pack, the people she grew up with, turned their backs when she needed them most. They called her a traitor for surviving an assassination attempt she didn't even plan. They said her existence was treason. They repeated lies louder than the truth, and once fear takes root, reason struggles to breathe. They left her in the mountain pass with a silver blade in her side and snow covering the rest. No trial. No second thought. No hand reached back for hers. They walked away like winter waiting for its due. And yet, in that blizzard, inches away from shutting down completely, she whispered something that told you everything about her heart. Voice rough from frost, lips cracked, breath trembling, she forced the words out, "I don't need a pack built on cruelty." No tears fell. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because the cold stole the water before it could even arrive. The air swallowed every sign of softness she had left. The storm wasn't just outside anymore, it was in her pulse, in the space between each breath, in that tiny quiet part of the soul that watches everything break and still keeps going. Under her ripped tunic, half hidden by blood and snow and exhaustion, something flickered faintly. A wolf mark along her ribs. Not a tattoo. Not paint. Not decoration. This was old. Ancient. Glowing a soft silver blue, like embers buried under ash. It dimmed and brightened like an unsteady flame, mirroring her energy. Most of her didn't know it was there. The part of her that did? The part that kept it? That was the part she avoided. Because that's the part everyone feared. But even afraid parts get tired of hiding. Even dormant power shivers when betrayal stings too deep. Right when things looked like the storm had won, right when you thought maybe the cold finally claimed her, a shape appeared through swirling snow. Big. Fast. Thunder silent. A massive black wolf cutting through the storm like it was built from the same night sky winter bows to. It wasn't some majestic slow-motion entrance. No dramatic music. No heroic pause. This wolf was desperate too. Wounded. Tracked. Hurt. The snow painted itself along its fur in chunks. There were deep puncture wounds across its flank, silver spear wounds. You could see the metal still embedded in places, burning against him. His breaths blew out in heavy clouds of steam. Weak, but furious. There were leather straps hanging off him, broken and stiff from the cold, and on his back, remains of a royal saddle. Torn. Pierced. Old metal etched with crust markings she'd never seen before. This wasn't a wild wolf. This was a wolf that carried history and fire and war in its bones. He ran toward her. And collapsed. Yeah. He collapsed. Right beside her legs as she struggled to lift her head. And for a minute, they were both just still. Not peaceful still. The kind of stillness where life hangs by a thread and neither of them knows who will cut first. His body hit the snow hard, proud strength undone by a weapon he couldn't outrun. Elara stared down at him, confusion washed clean by the cold. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but instincts get quieter when your heart still believes in kindness, even when your brain doesn't. She knew what those silver wounds felt like. She knew what exile felt like without even knowing his title. So she didn't move back. Didn't flinch away. Didn't think twice. And this is where the story tightens like a fist around your chest. Elara didn't kneel like a queen. She knelt like a survivor recognizing another survivor. With every bit of strength her body protested giving, she dropped to her knees in the snow. Reached for her old ragged cloak. The same cloak her pack elders stepped on when they left. She pulled it off her shoulders, ignoring the bite of the wind cutting straight through her. She draped it over the massive wolf, covering his wounds as best she could. The fabric wasn't rich. Wasn't magical. Wasn't perfect. It was fraying at the ends, patched with thin hope and old protection magic that barely held heat. But it was hers. And she gave it anyway. She dragged him toward a rock face. Big boulders stacked like a cliffside shield, half buried and crusted in ice. Every inch was brutal. He outweighed her, wounded or not. But the storm didn't move her. His breathing did. She pulled him behind the rocks where the wind softened by maybe 2%, the closest thing to shelter the mountain was offering anyone that night. Her arms shook like branches under winter weight. Her breath was thin, but steady in its intention. And when she finally propped his body against the rock wall, she collapsed forward again, one hand bracing his shoulder to keep him upright while the other slid down beside her into snow. Their eyes met properly then. His wolf gaze locked onto her. And listen, it wasn't confused like an animal. It was clear. Intelligent. Old soul old. Heavy like someone carrying decisions he never asked to make. Storm heavy like a king who has never truly known quiet. His pupils reflected the faint glow from her ribs. You could almost hear the moment his pride realized his body needed help, even if his instincts hated admitting it. He blinked once, slowly. Vulnerable, but measured. The kind of blink that says, I see you. I register you. I don't have the strength to fight your kindness, even if I don't fully trust it yet. She was afraid. Of course she was afraid. Let's not lie. A wolf like that collapsing near you in a storm could make anyone doubt their chances of making it to sunrise. But something deeper than fear pushed her forward. And so she leaned in, slow, not reckless. Gentle but not naive. She pressed her forehead against the wolf's snout, feeling the heat of his breath against her frozen skin. Cold cheeks warming in tiny patches where their breaths collided. Her heartbeat thumped uneven but stubborn. And through that shared breath, something silent passed between them. Not a bond yet. Not a kiss yet. But recognition. Warmth. Two souls acknowledging each other in a night built to erase everything living. And right before the audience gets too comfortable, right before the softness sits too long, the narrator voice slices through with intent. If you love intense shifter romance tales, you're already in it. This is Moonlight Desires. Subscribe now. Join the pack. Because listen, stories like this? They don't wait for you to think. They pull you before logic even laces its boots. From there, the moment deepens again without losing momentum. Elara inhaled sharply, feeling the ache of her wounds, the snow soaking into her knees, the growing dizziness threatening to blur the edges of the world. But she didn't pull away. She stayed in that space, forehead to wolf, breath to breath, exhaustion to empathy. She saw his wounds weren't natural. They were targeted. Crafted. Intentional. Someone wanted him down. Someone powerful enough to use silver. And maybe that was enough for her heart to decide, not all power deserved death, and not all wounded creatures were meant to be finished off by winter. She whispered to him again, quieter but sharper with new context, like talking to a friend who might not survive to answer, "Hold on. I got you. Just a little longer." No repetition in her words. No poetry. Just raw honest spoken surrender to compassion, even if her body was registering 100 reasons to run. And as she held on to him in the snow, neither of them knew this simple truth yet: the wolf wasn't just an alpha. He was the Alpha King. A ruler injured in an assassination attempt. A monarch collapsing at the hands of silver. And the girl shielding him? The exile deemed too dangerous to love by people who never bothered to ask for her truth. She had just saved a king without even knowing thrones existed in her story anymore. And trust me, there's nothing cliché about that. Because the most human, most powerful thing anyone can do sometimes, is choose kindness when the rest of the world has gone cold. And right here, right in these opening 5 minutes, you already feel the shift coming. The quiet rise of destiny pushed by heartbreak. The unspoken question lingering heavier than snow on branches: what happens when the person you risk everything for turns out to be someone the world expects you to kneel to? And what happens when he realizes his kingdom might only breathe peacefully when she's near? In that storm, in that shared breath, in those wounded gazes colliding quietly behind frozen rock, the story didn't just begin. It grabbed you. It dared you to care. It whispered of a queen before crowns were earned. And it pulled at the part of your soul that still believes a wounded wolf deserves warmth, even when the world calls everything powerful a threat. So listen, winter didn't stop after she whispered that vow. It followed her like an unpaid debt. But in the hours after saving that wounded wolf, something inside Elara shifted in a quieter, sharper way than any fire ever could. Not calmer. Not softer. Just clearer. Because when you look death in the face and it blinks back at you, everything unnecessary falls off your life like burnt paper. That's exactly what happened here. Her mind drifted just enough to pull her into a memory she never wanted to replay. She was back in the circle of her old pack ceremony. Torches blazing. Drums pounding like heartbeats of war. Young wolves chanting the laws that protected everyone except her. Elara stood in the middle, palms sweating, heartbeat punching against her ribs. The pup she defended was behind her legs, shaking. A beta lunged, weapon raised, not at her, but at that pup. And when she shifted, the world exploded. Not metaphorically. Literally exploded. The forbidden silver fire roared out of her like a scream she'd swallowed her whole life. It wrapped her body, flared into a massive fire-white wolf form, and the blast knocked the attacking beta back, injuring him. The pup was safe. But the truth? Truth never screamed louder than fear. The pack seer fell to her knees, eyes wide, voice quivering, monster. Flameborn curse. The council didn't ask if it was defense. They just saw power they didn't understand. Accusations flew faster than her fire ever did. Traitor. Curse. Danger to us all. Before the roar of her shift even finished echoing, a silver blade was already in her side. The decision was made without debate. She was cast out the same night, chased through stone passes, stabbed once more when she refused to stop running. She escaped only because she refused to shift again. Sometimes hiding your true self is the only way to survive an overcrowded judgment. And surviving made them hate her even more. That memory cracked like ice splitting in spring. And it left the same taste behind, bitter, metallic, isolating. Back in the snow-blocked present, she stared at the wounded black wolf, guilt twisting her features. She didn't know his kingdom. Didn't know his crown. Didn't know he ruled every wolf for miles surrounding these mountains. All she saw was a soul hurt by the same silver weapon that dictated her exile. So she murmured an apology into the frost-heavy air, voice quiet but heavy, like speaking to someone who might already be on the edge of fading. I'm sorry they used silver on you. I know what it feels like when they fear what you are. The wolf exhaled a slow breath against the stone. Not agreeing, not disagreeing. Just sharing the moment fully. His storm-heavy eyes softened in acknowledgement of shared pain, even if he didn't carry exile the way she did. Pain has many names, but recognition speaks one language. Their bond didn't grow through speeches. It grew through silence, shared body warmth, and the fragile trust between two wounded creatures bracing against a world that hunted power without asking its intention. She slid her hand along his fur again, slower this time. Not clinical. Not hesitant. Just present. Trust is built when hands don't shake away, even when survival screams the opposite. And the wolf didn't lean away. He let her stay. Let her touch. Let her warmth sit just long enough to form something unspoken between them. But the universe? The universe prefers slap-you-awake signs, not gentle nudges. The moment she decided to help him heal properly, she knew they couldn't stay behind those rocks forever. So using strength she barely had left, Elara stood again, teeth chattering in protest, body threatening to give out, and reached for the leather remnants strapped to him. Sure, there were etched crests. Symbols she didn't recognize. But exhaustion must have blurred royal caution, because she never thought twice about the possibility of kingships. She looped a broken strap around his chest carefully and began dragging him towards something older than ceremonies, a glacial cavern embedded in the mountainside like a forgotten secret. The cave mouth exhaled cold air like an ancient beast that never quite slept. Inside, runes glowed a dying faded blue, pulsing like old memories trying to keep a heartbeat. The walls didn't speak with actual words. No. But they felt like voices. Echoing ancient grief, ancient war, ancient promises no one had remembered to honor in centuries. She pulled the wolf onto a flat slab beside an ice altar that sat in the middle of the cavern, carved not from stone, but glacier ice itself. The moment stretched, silent except for the storm howling outside like an impatient crowd waiting for a verdict. Then it happened. The air above the altar shimmered and formed into a projection of a seer with hair like frost-spun silver, eyes glowing fully this time, voice both ancient and immediate. Not a spirit. Not a dream. A recorded prophecy. And it called directly into the silence. Child of the ash-silver crown. Elara staggered back, breath catching. The projection continued without waiting for her shock to settle, because prophecies don't pause for self-esteem to catch up. It showed her a fallen throne, shattered claw marks across its base. It showed a king with no queen, pacing a storm realm alone, bleeding in silence. It showed a blizzard twisting into a world-ending wall of frost swallowing every wolf in its path. And finally, two fractured rulers, one born in flame, one crowned in night, standing back to back, eyes glowing in shared power. The voice warned, unite, or winter takes all. The storm ends only when the ash wolf learns the king, and the king learns the ash. Elara dropped to her knees again. Not from exhaustion this time. From shock. But also from disbelief that felt like an old scar pulled open. Her voice cracked, harsh like ice scraping stone, not me. Destiny made a mistake. I barely survived exile. No crown would ever want someone like me. The projection didn't argue back. It didn't have to. The pulsing blue runes dimmed slowly now. Almost like a sigh ending. But the warning lingered heavier than snowdrifts at midnight. Behind her, the wounded wolf, still in animal form, dragged himself an inch forward despite pain making every movement cost something vital. He let his forehead dip gently against her shoulder, warmth brushing the frost-nipped skin there. And though neither of them understood the full shape of fate yet, let me tell you this, the storm didn't care about crowns that night. It cared about warmth. About survival. About connection born not from ceremony, but from shared breath in a world that tried its best to erase both. And somewhere deep in the mountains, with winter sharpening its claws outside, the first real spark of destiny didn't roar. It exhaled. Slowly. Right beside her heartbeat. Because kings and queens aren't always born in thrones, my friend. Sometimes they're born behind frozen rocks, under torn cloaks, in shared silence, with snow watching and finally stepping back. The cavern was finally quiet again, but the kind of quiet that feels temporary. The snow at the entrance kept swirling like it was shielding something, but also waiting. Waiting for conflict to come back and finish what it started. Inside, the air was thin, sharp, filled with the metallic scent of silver and old ice, and Elara could still feel the memory of those accusations burning a second hole beside her actual wounds. She hadn't even realized the wolf stirred until his breath ghosted warmer against her sleeve. Slow. Intentional. As if calling her back without using words at all. But words weren't on the menu that night. The moment she adjusted his cloak again to block drafts, the ground thundered, snow crunching, boots striking stone, multiple heavy bodies moving inside the storm. Shadow Pack warriors entered the cave in a tight arrow formation. Their cloaks were black, edges stiff from ice. Their eyes glowed a hungry amber, not wild, weapon-trained. They didn't know the wolf was king. They only knew alpha blood when they felt it humming in the air like pressure before lightning. They tracked it, claimed it, hunted it like a rare winter animal. Their breath plumed aggressively, shoulders forward, hands already on hilts, spears bearing silver tips that glimmered even in low blue runelight. One warrior pointed the spear at the wounded wolf and growled, "That one carries alpha marrow. He'll make our ranks rise." Another barked out, voice like cracking rock, "And you, exile girl, are protecting the enemy?" Elara stood straighter this time, not tall. Not powerful. But unbroken in posture. The kind of stance that says I've been stabbed twice, but you won't make me kneel a third time. The pup she saved months ago may as well have been watching through her spine right then, pushing her to hold dignity if nothing else. Her hand slid toward the hilt of her blade on instinct, but not to attack, to warn. To ready, not to threaten. They surged toward her anyway. Not negotiating, not doubting their assumption, not caring to read intent. This is what bias looks like when it travels in packs. The warriors circled her fast, snow melting around their boots into dark puddles. A silver net clicked open in one hand, designed for restraining beasts, or flame-born wolves who don't fit the mold. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs as old trauma flared in her bloodstream, but before she even calculated her next move, the wolf snapped awake in full protective fury. His wounded body launched forward with a roar that shook stalactites overhead. Not fake dramatic roaring. The real roar. Deep. Territorial. Proud. The kind even clueless doom packs instinctively respect. His teeth glinted savagely. His front claws dug into icy ground like thrones carved in instinct rather than stone. One warrior stumbled back. Then another. Fear rippled visibly across their formation as saddle leather straps jangled behind the wolf's flank, puncture wounds screaming but his protective instinct screaming louder. He didn't care they were wolves like him. He cared they were wolves against her. The warriors retreated like a tide pulled by a moon they didn't want to acknowledge. One spat his final judgment as they vanished back into storm static, "She corrupts anything she touches." They fled without realizing he corrupted their narrative by simply defending her. The cavern exhaled again as snow sealed the entrance behind them. Elara sagged back against the rock wall once they were gone. Her adrenaline didn't give her strength. It just gave her clarity. She looked at the wolf but stepped back emotionally, not physically. Emotionally. The distance between them felt like adding an extra layer of ice that night. There was gratitude in her eyes, but also a new bruise forming where trust would have sat. She murmured into frost air, voice rougher than the storm, "Thank you, but I can't keep borrowing protection from a wolf envoys want to hunt." Not loud enough for him to answer clearly. Just loud enough for the cave to understand her internal fracture. Time dragged, not romantically, survivally. She moved him farther inside, toward a frozen underground lake that glowed faintly from the cavern roof openings where moonlight snuck down in broken beams. She laid him gently beside the shore, snow powdering off their clothes and fur. Pain slowed everything down but didn't loosen pacing. Every movement meant something. She took her knife again, heated the tip in a small frost fire she sparked from a rune left glowing at the wall, and began removing silver shards from his side one by one. The wolf flinched, once, quietly. Then stilled fully under her hands, accepting the painful intimacy of healing. His whimper was tiny, honest, involuntary. A crack in dignity you don't apologize for because wound spoke first. Elara paused, listening. Not frightened now. Just more aware of how his pain sounded almost familiar. Painkin, not powerkin. She pulled the final shard free. Silver clinked to the ice like a punctuation mark. Then the shift happened. No thunder. No theatrical growl of transformation. It was quiet, painful, royal power condensing into human vulnerability. The fur dissolved into skin. The breath turned warmer but still heavy. And there he was for the first time in front of her human eyes. Kael Nightborne. Broad-shouldered. Scar-mapped like someone drew a history book on his skin. Hair dark as midnight ink, half damp with melting snow. His eyelashes still frosted. A faint, stubborn crown-shaped pressure lingering in his aura even if metal wasn't physically sitting on his head yet. He blinked slowly, adjusting to human balance again. He didn't stand immediately. He met her gaze at her level first. Respect delivered through proximity, not posture. He rasped out softly, "You saved my life, Elara." The quiet carried impact because exhaustion stole theatrics from his voice too. She gasped. And it wasn't melodramatic gasping. It was the gasp of someone realizing this creature wasn't just a beast with a snout. This was a man carrying storms of his own, storms he chose to walk into for her before either of them had even correct titles rooted in the story. She blurted, "How do you know my name?" Confusion bracing warmth. Kael let a slow breath out, steam meeting frost in midair between them. "Because I've been the one following your footsteps through every storm." No arrogance. No perfection. Just context. The kind of honesty that cuts through disbelief instead of replacing it. Their faces hovered close then, not because they planned to kiss, but because magnetic tension wrapped preferenceless around fractured hearts whether they called it destiny or not. Their lips were inches apart when the ice below them cracked violently again. A warning chasm splitting open through the lake's surface, deep enough for distance, wide enough for hesitation to survive. The almost kiss hung unfinished, not cancelled. Interrupted. Because even love has to wait sometimes when the world is still trying to swallow both sides whole. Elara didn't move away from the break in the ice though. She moved away from the assumption that everything powerful was built to destroy her. And Kael didn't move away from her fear either. He watched it, registering the distance. Understanding it hadn't come from the physical storm at all. It came from the silver before it. Ice broke beneath them, but it wasn't the only thing cracking anymore. Kael and Elara couldn't stay hiding in the mountain's ribs. The world was wider than caves, colder than visions, and louder than whispered apologies. Kael wrapped what was left of his strength around a single plan: get them both to the Frost Moon Council, the oldest wolf tribunal in the northern mountains. The journey there was brutal. Not the kind of brutal that gets poetic. The kind that gets honest. The snow didn't fall, it ambushed. Every step crunched with the sound of fragile bone. The higher they climbed, the thinner the air tasted, metallic and blue and ancestral. The cold made silence feel loud. Not comforting silence. Suspense silence, like the world inhaled and refused to exhale until royals said so. The council was hidden behind ice-structured pillars and jagged stone crowns formed naturally by frozen waterfalls. It felt regal because nature forced it to be regal. Wolves guarded the path in disciplined rows, armored in dark steel that winter respected just enough to avoid breaking. Kael walked in human form but carried the faint tremor of a wolf's aura vibrating under restraint. The pressure of his rank dipped into the snow like a footprint heavier than his boots. He tried to keep his posture neutral. But neutrality dies first in wolf courts. Power talks even when mouths aren't open. When Kael stated, "She walks under my protection tonight," the hall stiffened instantly. Elder wolves raised their heads. Council members, cloaked in ceremonial pelts, leaned forward. Not curious. Calibrating threat. Elara stayed behind his shoulder, limping but unbowed. She wasn't trying to look brave. She was trying not to relive being shoved into circles that called law a survival tactic and fear a credible judge. Kael tried to soften the edge by saying she was his guest, his voice carrying diplomatic calm but not washing away the royal obviousness. He wanted to give her a seat before her identity was a spectacle. But spectacle arrived anyway. Old pack ambassadors, wolves who knew her face before scars wrote maturity, stepped forward loudly. The sound of their entrance felt like snapping twigs in a quiet funeral. Loud for no reason but to make sure fear heard them first. One hissed out, "Flame-cursed exile, Elara of the Silver Ash bloodline." There was no room left for guest labels. They exposed her bloodline's truth like dropping a torch into a library full of gunpowder. The council erupted. Wolves snarled, claws unsheathing from fingers as winter magic flickered overhead in response to panic, tasting instability, and approving of it. Gasps, angry mutters, spears striking ground, Frost climbing the pillars like it was taking votes on who sided with chaos tonight. Kael hesitated. Only one heartbeat's length. Only 1 second. But seconds are loaded when your heart already expects abandonment. Elara didn't measure by clocks. She measured by who flinched. That hesitation wasn't a choice against her. It was an involuntary royal recoil recognizing the mention of prophecy, flame-cursed bloodline, council history, and political burden landing all at once. But emotion doesn't analyze politics mid-snow. Emotion registers pain. And Elara registered his pause like a third wound accurate enough to bleed invisible. She laughed once. Short. Sharp. Bitter like a frozen lake mirroring candlelight you can't reach. Then she murmured, voice just loud enough for everyone to realize silence doesn't always mean surrender. "I should have known kings don't kneel for exiles." She turned and ran. Snow erupted upward as if applauding her exit. Winter swirling violently behind her retreat, covering her steps fast like it wanted to erase her agency from the record. Kael shouted after her, but the wind carried the words away, splintering them instantly. Not into poetry. Into distance. She ran until a different biome swallowed her. A lower mountain pass where the snow roared flatter, thicker, ravenous, staring not at titles but at throats. Here, a caravan of common mountain wolves, families, elders, younglings, healers, and workers fleeing the Frost Wyrm invasion, was pinned at the edge of massacre. Ice Wyrm shifters descended from the skies like armored winter comets. Their bodies were half draconic, half wolf, ribbed in frost-scaled armor, breathing out white vapor that froze shields to stone and resolved to panic. They wanted Alpha Marrow to feed their war magic. They wanted the caravan to kneel to extinction. Elara didn't roar. She didn't think. She collapsed ethically into action. She inhaled once, tasting frost like a public verdict unreadable enough for her to finally stop asking courts to validate her existence. And then her ribs lit again, except this time, the flame didn't shake. It remembered purpose. Her silver fire erupted outward in a controlled explosion. Not wild, not accidental. Earned. She shifted into a massive white wolf formed entirely from radiant silver flame, fur crackling with blue-white embers like stars dying and being reborn instantly across her body. Her roar shook the snow off cliffs, not for intimidation, but because winter must recognize challenge before it respects unity. She launched into the air. Met the ice WYRMS above the pinned wolves. They collided mid-storm in a conflagration of frost and flame so hot it boiled snow into vapor instantly before freezing it again around the edges in crystalline structures you could cut confession letters with. The battle wasn't elegant. It was perfect in its honesty. Claws ripping through scales, flame melting frost, frost slowing flame, silver hissing against ice-constructed muscle. Elara took every blow personally, but not vindicatively. Protectively. Because sometimes the most threatening thing to your enemy is the fact you refuse to make bystanders pay for your exile. She fought alone. Not lonely. Alone in responsibility, together in purpose. She tore the final ice wyrm from the sky, slammed it into the stone floor of the mountain pass, flame-consuming the frost beast until it collapsed into nothing but char-silver bone and wintermelt runoff. Then the fire receded. Because even legends borrow bodies before they pay nature back. Elara collapsed again. Except this time, the air caught her differently. Not pushing her face down into snow. Holding her upright in reverence. The caravan wolves, shaking, bruised, frost-cut, blood-nipped, crawled toward her and knelt anyway. Not because fire ordered them. Because gratitude is the oldest tribunal known to wolves and humans alike. One elder murmured, voice thick, awed and breaking in equal measure, flame saved, not flame cursed. And right then, the narrator truth finally landed in full weight, not heavy like boots, heavy like hearts choosing sides without spears involved. She rose not because she wanted a crown, but because someone needed saving. But Kael saw it from the cliffs above the council tribunal too late. Not witnessing the moment she saved wolves. Witnessing the moment she stopped running from destiny and started running toward purpose. And when the wind finally exhaled again, calmer this time, it carried a vow neither politics nor prophecy could fully translate yet. The vow of two wounded rulers who might not want thrones, but might finally want each other. Kael didn't stop moving after the battle dust settled. Not because a king is built for endurance, but because something in him snapped into urgency the moment Elara's body went limp in reverence among common wolves who saw her worth before any council ever could. He shifted back into human form only long enough to gather her up properly. The snow bit angrily at his bare forearms as he carried her up the mountain steps. Every stair felt like climbing into judgment again, but this time, it wasn't Elara who trembled. It was the world around them reacting to the aura of a king whose heart just realized what his instincts already knew. The storm followed them upward like it regretted letting her live alone. The wind clawed at their backs. His boots carved deep prints into snow that glowed faintly from rune residue clinging to Elara's clothes. The cold slapped sense into him, but it also sharpened fear. Fear that he'd carry her back just to lose her to words again. When the council gates appeared, ice-forged and massive, Kael didn't pause this time. No diplomatic softness. He kicked them open with a thudding force that echoed through pillars carved from frozen waterfalls. Wolves turned. Council members stood. Ambassadors shrank back a fraction. The air inside the hall wasn't warmer, but it was still. Charged. Watching him approach. Kael carried Elara silently now. Breath steady but jaw tight, eyes fixed forward like someone who's replaying a hesitation he can't rewrite. The council didn't have time to accuse before he reached the base of the frozen throne. The throne was carved from glacier hard ice, old, regal, unyielding. And instead of lifting her onto it, he placed her gently, almost painfully so, at its foot. Not on the seat. Not above him. Not below him anymore. Beside him in significance, even if her eyes were closed. Her pulse was there. Weak but present. Kael knelt once, hands hovering over hers without touching yet, because touching her now felt like promising something he hadn't earned permission to say aloud. His voice finally scraped free from his throat, broken quiet but deliberate, "Elara, don't go silent on me now." The council inhaled sharply behind them. The blue runes embedded in the pillars flared brighter instinctively like the hall itself was bracing for a transformation not finished yet. And this is when the narrator breaks through the storm and speaks directly to you, friend to friend, heart to heart, because stories like this don't survive being distant. Let me ask you something real. Would you have chosen her, or feared her too? Would you have walked away when the fire flared, or stepped closer when it flickered? The question sits heavy for a second, not to drag time, but to pull you in fully. Because choice is the real magic here. Not crowns. And Kael didn't speak, but his posture asked the same question louder than words ever could. He stared down at her hand, fingers barely apart from hers, and the silence dared everyone present, including you, to answer honestly. Then the call comes in like putting your hand on a cold window when you feel heat on the other side. If this story lit something inside you. If you felt the cold, the wounds, the fire, the hesitation. Subscribe to Moonlight Desires. Because here, we tell tales that burn. No fancy language. No pitch. Just the truth said, like handing someone the last blanket in a storm and trusting they'll survive long enough to thank you back someday. The hall lights dimmed again once her pulse steadied a fraction stronger under his gaze. But shadows at the far edge of the throne room gathered like smoke seeing open doors. A voice whispered from the dark. Old. Rough. Ancient as winter but unfamiliar as prophecy you haven't read yet. She is not the only one. The snow outside the hall responded. Not falling downward anymore. Falling upward. Slowly at first. Then faster, defying weight, defying expectation. The frost pillars hummed like danger just voted yes. A tremor rolled through stone. Through ice. Through canyon silence between lovers not crowned yet. Because this wasn't a story end. It was the moment winter leaned in and said, your world is wider than wounded caves and councils with silver spears. And the fire beside the throne? It had just opened its eyes again. Not roaring yet. Not silent anymore. Just breathing. With a heartbeat powerful enough to make kings kneel. Elara woke to warmth she didn't recognize. No, not soft warmth. The earned kind. The kind that smells like herbs, pine oil, and wolf healer magic humming under the floorboards. She wasn't in chains. She wasn't on trial. She wasn't on frozen stone, begging to be heard. She was wrapped in thick furs on a carved oak bed inside a royal healing chamber built into the mountain's heart. The windows were tall, framed in black iron shaped like crescent moons. Outside, snow rose upward in gusts sometimes, magical disruption still licking the sky. But here it fell the normal way. Gentle, calm, respectful. Not attacking. Just witnessing. Kael sat beside her on a low stone bench, elbows on knees, shoulders heavy, breath slow. His battle armor was gone. Black leather bracers rested on the floor. His chest was bare but covered in healing salves, scars crossing his physique like painful constellations. The crown wasn't on his head this time. It sat on a small cedar table beside a steaming cup of mountain root tea. The metal gleamed faintly, reflecting blue from the runes embedded in the walls. He didn't touch it. Not even once. Which told you everything. A king choosing a moment where power stands aside so truth can speak. Elara blinked, eyes adjusting, pulse stronger than before but still carrying battle fatigue. The moment she tried to sit up, Kael was already on his feet, hand hovering near her spine, not forcing her down, not pulling her up. Just there in case gravity betrayed her again. But she held herself upright this time, trembling only slightly. Vulnerability with dignity, not surrender. Their eyes locked. No spark theatrics. No dramatic pause. Just recognition stronger than prophecy suggestions. Kael opened his mouth, but his voice arrived like a rasp scraping frost off stone, quiet, honest, the kind of honesty that shames arrogance itself. I hesitated because I feared losing you, not because I doubted you. The words didn't sound rehearsed. They sounded like someone who chewed the sentence 200 times before daring to feed it air. And for the first time, his tone carried something more dangerous than alpha aura, regret shaped like love. Elara didn't nod. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. She listened. Because listening is the first counterattack to lies. She inhaled slowly, letting the mountain root-scented warmth enter her lungs without burning this time. Then she answered, conversational but unfiltered, trust is earned, Kael. Crowns don't shortcut it. The council who feared her couldn't hear this moment, but if they could, they might realize how fragile lies sound beside calm truth. Kael didn't flinch. Instead, he sat back down slower, meeting her at eye level now, knees cracking quietly under his own healing exhaustion. He reached forward a fraction, letting the back of his fingers brush a scar along her forearm where silver blades wrote their signatures earlier. The touch wasn't claiming. It was acknowledging pain without fear. She didn't pull away. Which meant the slightest opening was allowed. Not forgiven. Allowed. Silence settled between them again, but this time it synced instead of separating. His breath fogged warmer inches from her face. Hers misted gentler toward his. And slowly, their heartbeats began overlapping in the stillness, no magic needed for that. Just proximity, exhaustion, and honesty bridging space Silver tried to carve permanently. Then it happened. She felt it before she consciously labeled it. A pulse under her ribs. A faint but steady hum in the air that behaved differently around him. Not roaring dominance. Not predatory pressure. Peaceful power recognizing home frequency. His alpha aura, normally thunder loud around his wolves, was calm here. Flowing low. Gentle, but ancient. It hummed peacefully only in her presence, like a storm that remembers its name when it recognizes the only place it doesn't feel like chaos. Elara paused, frowning, not from fear but realization. Your power goes quiet around me, she said internally, because some thoughts don't need to be voiced to land heavy. Kael noticed her noticing. Connection deepens not when fire explodes, but when silence chooses you both equally. And in that healing chamber, protected by furs and war wounds and mutual exhaustion, the story wasn't about a girl waking beside a king. It was about a king realizing his calm might have always had her name hidden inside it. The mountain didn't bother to hush itself before the next chapter arrived. You ever notice how truth comes knocking when you're least ready? That knock wasn't literal. It was armor, staff, age, authority, and the stubborn thump of wolves who've lived long enough to know fear is a bad advisor. The chamber doors opened, and the mountain pack elders stepped in, furs thick, braids silvered, eyes sharp like winter moonlight bouncing off a clean blade. They weren't here to judge. They were here to witness, and witnessing hits different. They bowed first. Not to Kael. To the room itself, then to Elara. Respect for a healer's chamber. Respect for life saved under snow that wasn't theirs to command. Their voices rumbled low, ancient, gravel-rough, disciplined. One elder slammed his staff, made from black stone and wolf fang, into the floor, and the room stilled reflexively. Every guard outside the hall probably felt that vibration in their teeth. She saved us, he said, voice steady but edged with memory. And with those words, behind Kael and Elara's joined silence, a second wave of truth rolled in. Heavy. Unfiltered. No ceremony needed. They told the tale like narrators themselves, recounting snowstorms, collapsing wolves, ice wyrms, raging flames, children pulled from massacres, and frost portals that tried to finish a legend early. They spoke of how she fought alone in the storm realm. How the flame wrapped itself into wolf shape and challenged winter without making the bystanders pay its bill. Their testimony wasn't praising her power. It was praising her choice. And choice lives longer than prophecy if your heart keeps its spine. Then an elder turned toward Kael, fangs showing fully as he exposed the shocklore no one could tiptoe around anymore. Kael Nightborne, he said slowly, name landing like shifting stone. Alpha King of the Nightborne line. Elara froze, not in awe. In disbelief. Because when everyone around you gasps at a title, it sounds like a warning, not a gift. Kael didn't stand taller. If anything, his shoulders tightened like someone just hung every mistake and every future war on his vertebrae at once. His crown sat ignored on the cedar table, gleaming stubborn but irrelevant. The elders continued. They told why his wounds smelled of silver, why they were political, why winter was weaponized in a kingdom war older than most wolves ever get to study. The Frost Wyrm Alphas staged his assassination attempt, trying to harvest the marrow of a king whose bloodline was a lock they wanted a key for. They didn't want his throne. They wanted his lineage to stop breathing altogether. And stopping a king's breath means stopping a realm's future. Then the prophecy slid in again. Future queen, flameborn, crown-marked. Her blood is tied to yours. Unite the lines. Or winter eats every border it made. Political stakes climbed. But emotional stakes? They sprinted ahead barefoot in snow. Elara didn't look at pillars. Didn't study carved thrones. Didn't daydream about kingdoms. Her eyes flicked back to the bandaged wolves outside the chamber windows, common people who have pups and quotas and futures that aren't decorative. The ones nearly slaughtered. The ones who kneeled out of gratitude, not orders. Kael watched her face tighten with a different kind of fire. Not prophecy fire. Protective fire. And gods, that kind of flame scares tyrants more than kingships ever could. One council ambassador tried to speak, but Elara cut the moment with a conversational honesty colder than the snow outside. I don't care who wears metal on their head. I care who tries to use silver on pups. I care who treats survivors like treason instead of testimony. The elders didn't argue, because even royals respect a voice that refuses to bend to the wrong narrative. Kael's alpha aura hummed low again, but this time it was conflicted. Because he was watching the girl who saved him reject the importance of his throne while embracing the responsibility he thought only he ever carried alone. And that was the moment a king realized his kingdom might finally need a ruler who didn't ask for a crown to tell the truth. And Elara? She stood there wrapped in healing furs, firemark glowing steadily now, not shaking anymore, not proud, not broken, not kneeling, just choosing to care, which is shockingly threatening in wolf kingdoms that got comfortable punishing compassion. And the snow outside? It listened. Didn't clap. It recalculated allegiance. Snowflakes don't change shape for drama. But outside the healing chamber, the storm did something strange. It slowed, like someone had half-closed a cold fist in midair. Inside, Kael felt it first. Not as a king sensing weather, but as a wolf sensing another soul tugging at his bones. He raised his head a fraction, like he was listening to something under the floorboards of the world itself. Far away from him, down 3 stone corridors, up 2 spiral staircases, past carved wolf statue sentries, Elara gasped out of nowhere. She'd just been sitting, breath normal, scars healing, mood sharpened by hard truths. Then a spike of pain ran through her ribs. Not hers. His. The wound from the silver spears, the one she carved ice apart to dig shards out of. She clutched the bedding instinctively, disoriented, breath-catching. A healer reached for her arm, but she waved him off, embarrassed by her own reaction. How do you explain pain that belongs to someone else but feels like it signed a lease in your body? Kael grunted in another room, teeth grinding, because a wave of exhaustion punched through him like a body blow. He'd never been the type to complain, not even when kingdoms tried to murder him, but this wasn't a complaint. It was shock. Because woven through that exhaustion, he felt her pulse. Fast. Human. Warm. Thudding once, twice, like a match being struck in a dark cave. It shook him more than his enemies ever had. He physically staggered, hand bracing the wall. A guard sprang to help him, but Kael shot him a warning glare, not of anger, but of panic disguised as command. No one was allowed to see the moment the king balanced himself because of a girl's startled heartbeat echoing through stone. That night, sleep wasn't sleep. For either of them. Elara dreamed of mountains. Not the sharp peaks she grew up under. His mountains. The obsidian throne hall half buried in frost, wolves pacing restless, northern lights folding like cosmic banners overhead. She saw Kael kneeling in snow in a memory that wasn't hers, hands blood-soaked, holding a dying wolf child he couldn't save. She jolted awake with tears hot enough to make the cold air hiss. Her breath came shaky. She wasn't mourning ghosts. She was mourning his failure, his weight, his scars that were older than battle. She hated that she could feel it. Hated more that a part of her wished she could have been there sooner for him. Kael woke at the same instant, sitting bolt upright in darkness, because he heard something impossible, her heart beat again, this time not startled, not pained, but alive and emotional, racing from grief. It came through stone like a secret drum, unmistakable, intimate, uninvited. He swung his legs out of bed, bare feet hitting cold marble. He didn't have dreams about being chased. His nightmares were about losing others. But now, the nightmare braided itself to her rhythm. He muttered into the silent room, voice low as thunder trapped in a distant cloud, "Why does it sound like life I should defend?" They met in the corridor without planning to. That tells you everything about pull you can't schedule. Elara froze when she saw him, eyes glass bright, breath misting. She tried to step back, but her body betrayed her, a shiver ran through her as his deep, overlapping aura brushed too close. Kael stepped forward purely out of instinct, one stride, then another, closing space like a predator closing a hunt he never wanted. But this was no hunt. His nostrils flared with shock because he could smell her emotions, grief, stubbornness, fear, and a furious spark of connection she was trying to hide like a flame behind thin ice. Supernatural collision, messy and physical. No metaphors needed. "You feel it too?" she asked, voice small but sharp. Kael exhaled slowly, tone gravel deep, human rough, honest. "I hear you. Even when you don't want to be heard." A beat of silence stretched, shared, electric, terrifying, because they both realized connection wasn't a concept anymore. It was sensation, violation, aftermath. Her pain hit him again, faint, but emotional. His pain tapped at her ribs in answer. They were wounded in different languages, but the wounds had started translating each other without permission. Then the confrontation landed, not grand, not poetic, just brutally real. Kael, voice low. "I ran from prophecy." Elara, whispering back, voice tight. "And I ran from Pax." Together, almost overlapping, voices cracking under tension they weren't trained for. "So why does it sound like it found us anyway?" And that was the moment the mate bond stopped behaving like rumor and started behaving like gravity. The horizon shivered first, a pale gray shaking that didn't belong to sunrise or storm. The Frost Wyrm Kingdom was coming. Their army didn't march, they glided over snow, blades catching the faint moonlight, frost breathing from their mouths, eyes hunting. Kael stood atop the cliff of the Nightborne fortress, wind tearing at his dark hair, wolf senses stretched taut. The air smelled metallic, powdery, and wrong. Snow had become more than weather, it was a weapon. Sharp, slicing, omnipresent. Every flake was a dagger, every gust a pushing fist. Every wolf under Kael's command felt it in bones before they saw it with eyes. He bared his teeth in thought, a low, invisible growl resonating from deep in his chest. Commands rolled out like stone avalanches, disciplined, practiced, precise. Wolves fell into ranks. They were soldiers of fang, claw, and blood, yet every one of them knew they stood on the edge of annihilation. And Kael felt the weight of their trust heavier than any crown. Elara appeared on the cliff edge beside him, her cloak whipping like a flag, eyes alight with that flame he recognized as hers, not silver blaze, not fully unleashed, but will. She didn't hide. She didn't whisper. She didn't crouch in a healer's shadow. She stepped forward, chin high, blood-scented determination rolling off her in waves. "I'm fighting with them, Kael," she said. "No question. Just fact." Her silver mark shimmered faintly beneath her torn layers, hinting at the untamed fire lying dormant. Every step she took forward made the wind hesitate like it was waiting for her permission. Kael turned sharply, face taut, jaw working as he swallowed words heavier than mountain rock. He couldn't articulate it fully, but he felt it in every nerve. She didn't know the danger of the power she carried. Full shift control wasn't ready. Every instinct screamed that if she unleashed now, the battlefield would become a storm that neither wolf nor enemy could survive. "No," he growled, hands gripping the cliff edge. Eyes met hers, steel against fire. "You stay behind me. Not because you're weak, Elara. Because you can't control it yet. The flames, you can't let them loose. Not here. Not now." Her laugh was sharp, brittle with frustration. "Control? You mean hesitation? You protect wolves, Kael. Let me do the same. Every second I spend waiting, someone dies. Every heartbeat I spend hiding, the frost eats another life." The wind tore between them, catching her words and flinging them across ranks of warriors already bracing for impact. Kael's chest heaved, not from cold, not from battle prep, but from the clash of heartbeats, wills, and trust. He wanted to obey the kingly instinct to protect, to measure, to dominate the situation. She wanted chaos, action, and the justice that comes from standing in the front lines. A silver gust whipped through them as if the mountain itself felt their tension. Wolves watched, some snapping ears, some growling softly, sensing not just an argument but a bond bending under pressure. Kael's hands clenched. Elara's fists curled. Their eyes didn't break. "I'm not your shield," she spat, and every syllable vibrated with authority that rivaled his. "I'm not waiting for you to tell me I can breathe while people bleed." Kael's breath left in a long exhale, slow and trembling with internal storm. He leaned forward, face near hers, voice low, rough, almost feral. "Then don't fight them half the way, Elara. Learn the fire before it consumes the wolves you claim to protect." Her glare sharpened, pulse hammering through snow-cracked skin. Every heartbeat between them was war, hearts clashing harder than claws, stronger than winter, electric enough to charge the very air they stood in. And the Frost Wyrm army hadn't yet breached the first wall. The battle hadn't started. But the war between trust and necessity, control and instinct, fire and steel, had already ignited. Snow whipped higher, lightning flared across frost clouds, and Kael realized something cold, undeniable, and terrifying. They were fighting not just an army, but fate itself. The battlefield dissolved into chaos faster than the mind could name it. Frost lightning snapped like jagged glass across the sky. Wolves scattered, yipping and growling, and snow fell with the intent of murder. Then it happened. A pulse of frost magic unlike anything Elara had felt before wrapped around her like a living thing. The world twisted. The air screamed. It pulled her sideways, forward, downward, into a storm portal that tore at her very bones. Ice shards flared, snow whipped inward like teeth. She gasped, every muscle straining against the invisible force dragging her away. Fear clawed at her chest, but instinct did something faster. Fire stirred beneath her ribs, silver flame flickering with defiance. Kael didn't hesitate. He saw her vanish into the portal and the world fell into two pieces, before and after. His roar tore through the storm outside, shaking the frost from cliffs, warning the army below to hold fast. Then he shifted. Not half, not cautious, but fully, King Wolf, for black as midnight with streaks of silver like lightning frozen in motion. Muscles coiled, claws digging into ice, eyes burning with alpha intensity. No calculation. No plan. Just the raw pull of the bond, the mate bond screaming her name through time and space. He leapt, snow exploding around him, into the heart of the unknown. The storm realm swallowed him whole. Wind screamed in languages he didn't know. Frost screamed in runes, cold enough to bite bone. But he landed beside her. She'd braced herself, silver flame dancing along her shoulders, face streaked with snow and determination. Their eyes met first. Fear and relief collided, two storms mirrored. And without words, the storm acknowledged them as equals, partners. They fought side by side. Claws ripped ice beasts apart, fangs tore through frost-sculpted scales, and fire clashed with cold in a rhythm older than kingdoms. Every move had weight, every dodge demanded trust. They moved as one entity now, not separate warriors. Every strike they landed fed into the mate bond, burning white-hot through their veins. Pain and power, instinct and instinct intertwined. A giant Frost Wyrm lunged. Elara met it with silver flame, Kael with shadowed teeth, their attacks colliding in the monster's chest. Sparks and shards erupted, lighting the storm in violent, brilliant flashes. When it fell, trembling, defeated, the world seemed to exhale around them. But their victory wasn't clean. Their bodies burned not from frost or flame alone, but from the sudden ignition of something they could no longer deny. The mate bond erupted fully. Heartbeats matched. Breath synchronized. Every nerve fired as if reality itself insisted on recognition. He looked at her, eyes black and gold, amber rimmed with silver. She looked back, chest rising, face flushed from exertion and the bond's fire. No hesitation. No gentle approach. The air hummed. The storm roared. And then lips collided. Not soft. Not testing. Collision. Teeth brushed lips. Breath mingled, silver flame licking edges of ice. Hands clutched, for pressed, eyes shut against a world that had demanded war before surrender. Fire and ice, alpha and flame, king and exile, finally touching the truth they had been running from. The kiss broke only when their lungs burned. Snow still tumbled around them, ice shards hovering midair like the storm itself was watching. They leaned foreheads together, chest to chest, bonded by fire, blood, and magic, aware that nothing in the world, prophecy, Frost Wyrms, councils, could ever undo this. For the first time amid chaos and frost and battlefield carnage, they stood as mates, equals, survivors, and the storm no longer had the power to separate them. The council chamber felt impossibly still after the storm. Snow still whispered along the high windows, brushing against frost-carved ledges, like it had paused to witness the aftermath of a battle it could never forget. Wolves, both ordinary and elite, lined the stone floors, silent but alert, ears twitching, claws scraping faintly against the frost-polished stone. All eyes turned toward the center where Elara and Kael stepped forward. She was wrapped in furs, still carrying traces of silver flame and exhaustion, the fire in her veins humming quietly but fiercely. He followed, tall, scarred, regal, alpha aura pulsing low, like a steady heartbeat that commanded attention without arrogance. The council had waited for this moment. The Frost Moon Council had expected her to kneel, to accept the queen mantle because prophecy demanded it. The silver crown gleamed under the candlelight, light refracting into shards across the icy floor, waiting to be placed upon her head. The room held its breath. Silence stretched like a frozen bridge between two worlds, expectation and choice. Elara didn't reach. She didn't step closer to the crown. Instead, she let her gaze wander, observing every wolf in the chamber who had survived the carnage, every elder who had witnessed her strength, every shadow that had tested her will. Her hand brushed the fur at her chest, feeling the residual hum of her bond with Kael, the pulse of life that had kept her from being swallowed by the storm. The crown was just metal, prophecy just words. They could not measure the fire that had lived inside her every choice, every heartbeat, every leap into chaos. Kael moved then, deliberately, quietly, reaching forward. His fingers closed around the crown, lifting it slowly, reverently. He turned it in his hands, studying the delicate filigree, the cold weight of history resting in silver. And then his voice carried across the chamber, calm but deliberate, enough for every wolf to hear. It was always yours if you survived the storm. But I want it to be yours because you choose me, not because prophecy said so. A ripple passed through the room. Wolves shifted. Elders exhaled softly. The crown seemed to glow faintly under his hands, acknowledging the choice that wasn't demanded but offered. And yet, Elara didn't move toward it. She didn't reach out to claim destiny's claim. Instead, she took a step forward, closing the gap between them, closing every expectation that had hung in the air. Her hand pressed firmly over his chest, directly above his heart. Warmth radiated through her fingers, grounding, tethering, claiming. I don't choose the throne, she said, voice steady, carrying authority that no council could contest. I choose the wolf who ran into the storm with me. The words landed like snow settling softly on stone, final, undeniable. Kael's eyes softened, gold meeting silver flame, a flash of relief, awe, and love mingling in their gaze. The crown gleamed in his other hand, waiting, beautiful, untaken, but no longer necessary. Because choice had been made, not by destiny, not by prophecy, but by them. The room exhaled collectively. Wolves tilted heads, ears pricked, instincts settling in respect. The elders didn't scold, didn't lecture. They understood, the throne is temporary, the bond is eternal. Kael leaned down just slightly, letting her fingers stay over his heart, letting her warmth anchor him after the storm, after battle, after prophecy and frost and fire. The Alpha who had faced the Frost Wyrms, the exiled girl who had faced the Snowstorm and herself, now stood together, not because destiny demanded, but because they chose each other. And in that choice, louder than any crown, the chamber understood the real rule of power: love forged in fire and storm outweighs all silver and prophecy. The chamber behind them felt like a memory already. Frost clung to the windows, but outside, snow began to slow, settling softly as though it had finally been convinced the storm had no argument left. Elara stood in the center of the chamber, heart still pounding from battle, mate bond, and choice. She closed her eyes, and for the first time, she called the fire within her without fear. The silver flame flickered along her skin like liquid moonlight, coiling around her ribs, her arms, her spine. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Then, at will, she shifted. Not wild, not uncontrolled, not a blur of terror or instinct. She shifted fully into her wolf form, white fur laced with silver, eyes glowing faintly like a quiet storm, restrained, fierce and precise. This time, it was hers, not the world's, not prophecies, not fears. Kael watched, pulse steady, chest rising in rhythm with hers. His body shifted, dark fur tinged with silver like shadowed starlight, powerful, broad, alpha essence sharp but softened by something warmer now: love, trust, the bond that had burned white-hot in the storm realm. He stepped forward on padded claws, no hesitation, no judgment, only presence. He exhaled a low, resonant growl, a sound that said, "I am here. I am yours. We are together." They moved together, instinctively, paws crunching over frost-polished stone as if the mountain itself had cleared a path. Outside, snow no longer whipped. Wind no longer threatened. It danced gently around them, carrying the faint scent of pine, smoke, and distant frost rivers. The mountain seemed to bow, snow calming as if acknowledging that fire and night had reconciled. Elara lifted her head, ears twitching, sniffing the air. Her heart, even in wolf form, beat with awareness of the humans, the wolves, the world below, but her focus was here, with him. Kael shifted closer, brushing flanks, eyes locking hers in mutual recognition. No words were needed. Every movement, every brush of fur, every synchronized heartbeat said what humans might never understand. They were alpha and flame, exile and king, bond forged in battle, tested in storm, tempered in fire. The cliff edge jutted outward, jagged and tall, overlooking valleys blanketed in snow that no longer threatened, but rested, gentle and watchful. They stepped forward together, claws finding purchase on icy stone, paws sinking lightly in powdered snow. Wind lifted around them, carrying the faint warmth of fire meeting night. They stopped at the precipice, side by side, silhouettes of dark and light against the moonlit expanse. For the first time in a long while, the world felt still. The weight of crowns, prophecy, and fear had melted into a shared pulse, a bond unbreakable, chosen, alive. Elara tilted her muzzle toward him. Kael leaned forward, letting noses touch, the smallest contact, but it resonated like thunder in still air. The bond had been forged through fire, frost, and choice. It had been tested in storms, nightmares, and battle. And now it settled into something eternal, patient, unstoppable. The mountain below remained quiet, snow drifting like soft feathers. Frost did not bite. Ice did not threaten. The fire inside her did not burn unchecked, but glowed steady, illuminating the night softly. The alpha beside her pulsed in harmony. The mate bond hummed beneath them, a light forged through chaos, now calm, eternal, and alive. And the narrator's voice, low and prophetic, whispered across the cliff, through the wind and frozen pines. Winter feared fire, until fire learned to love the night. The snow whispered back. The mountains exhaled. And the story, for all it had survived, was only just beginning.